as though. I get a lot of questions about the word though, and when you put as in front of it, this creates a type of conjunction, as though. It's similar to as if. We use as though when describing a person's perception. You describe something that you believe to be true. It's your perception. Something makes an impression on you. As though is a subordinating conjunction. Following as though, you need to use some kind of a subject and a verb. That looks as though it's, here's the subject and then here's the verb, difficult. And then difficult is the adjective that describes this, whatever this is. That looks as though it's difficult. That looks difficult. Here is the subject. This is the verb. It's a linking verb for this adjective, which is also the subject complement. That looks difficult. Or that looks as though it's difficult. The first sentence is sufficient to express a person's opinion about something, whatever this is. That looks as though it's difficult. This helps to increase the idea that it's a person's perception. These two sentences have the same meaning. You don't have to add this. But it's very common to use as though when talking about a person's perception. We use as though for situations that are imaginary or apparent to the person speaking. In other words, this is for a person's perception. I believe something is true, and so I can use as though when describing something that I believe is true. He looks as though he's floating in the air. Is he actually floating in the air? This could be some sort of an illusion. It's not real. But what I see looks as though the person is floating, but he actually isn't floating. This could be some kind of a magic trick or something else that gives the appearance that a person is floating. She seems as though she's mad. Here's the subject, and then here's the linking verb. Here is the conjunction, and then here is the subject, verb, and then here is an adjective. So this is a complex sentence. You could replace seems with looks or sounds. Linking verbs are similar to the verb be, which is also a kind of linking verb. They connect the subject to what comes after it. And then this is what comes after it, as though she's mad. She seems as though she's mad. She sounds as though she's mad. That's based on her voice. And she looks as though she's mad based on her appearance. He's walking as though he is in pain. Here's the first part of the sentence, and then here's the conjunction, as though, and then here is the subject, and then here's a verb, and then here's a prepositional phrase. This is a person's perception or idea about this subject. This is the expression of an opinion, but it could be a very obvious comment about a person who's walking. That's the way it looks as he walks. If I put this in the past tense, he was walking, this would be the past continuous tense, as though he was in pain. Or we can use the subjunctive and say, as though he were in pain. He was walking as though he were in pain. Remember that as though is very similar to as if. And with if, the subjunctive very frequently follows. And in this case, you would choose to use were, even though the subject is he. As though is very similar to as if. I made a video about as if in the past, if you want to do a search on my channel. But I want to focus on as though in this video, mainly because of the word though. Many students are confused by though because of the different ways it gets used. Though will appear in even though and although, and sometimes just though. And I think that's why a lot of students will ask me about this word and how it's used. He acts as though he were a king. Notice that this is in the subjunctive after as though. We often do use the subjunctive, but you don't have to do that. We could just use was. Remember that as though is similar to as if. It's almost exactly the same thing. He acts as if he were a king. Were helps to emphasize that something is not real, not true. When expressing disappointment, you'll hear as though in a sentence like this one. It looks as though we won't get what we wanted. In this sentence, here is a subject, and then here's the verb, here's the conjunction, and then following the conjunction, here's a subject, and then here's the verb, won't get, helping verb and main verb. And then there's this, what we wanted. This is a noun clause that follows get. In this noun clause, here is a subject, and then here's a verb. And this is functioning sort of as an object. It looks as though we won't get what we wanted. This is a complex sentence. The main clause is here, and then the dependent clause begins with as though, and then what follows it. If this video helped you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel.